And now, Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey.
If you go flying back through time and you see somebody else flying forward into the future, it's probably best to avoid eye contact. You know what's probably a good thing to hang on your porch in the summertime to keep mosquitoes away from you and your guests? Just a big bag full of blood. We tend to scoff at the beliefs of the ancients, but we can't scoff at them personally, to their faces, and this is what annoys me. If aliens from outer space ever come and we show them our civilization and they make fun of it, we should say we were just kidding, that this isn't really our civilization, but a gag we hope they would like. Then we tell them to come back in 20 years to see our real civilization. After that, we start a crash program of coming up with an impressive new civilization. Either that or just shoot down the aliens as they're waving goodbye. You know what it is that frightens ants the most? It's not the anteater, and it's not the steamroller. No, wait, it is the steamroller. I got mixed up. If you're robbing a bank and your pants suddenly fall down, I think it's okay to laugh, and to let the hostages laugh too. Because come on, life is funny. I bet for an Indian, shooting an old fat pioneer woman in the back with an arrow, and she fires her shotgun into the ground as she falls over, is like the top thing you can do. Sometimes I think I'd be better off dead. No, wait. Not me, you. It takes a big man to cry, but it takes a bigger man to laugh at that man. To me, boxing is like a ballet, except there's no music, no choreography, and the dancers hit each other. I think a good movie would be about a guy who's a brain scientist, but he gets hit on the head and it damages the part of the brain that makes you want to study the brain. It's too bad that whole families have to be torn apart by something as simple as wild dogs. You know one thing that will really make a woman mad? Just run up and kick her in the butt. P.S. This also works with men. I can't stand cheap people. It makes me real mad when someone says something like, "Hey, when are you going to pay me that $100 you owe me?" Or, "Do you have that $50 you borrowed?" Man, quit being so cheap. The face of a child can say it all, especially the mouth part of the face. Children need encouragement, so if a kid gets an answer right, tell him it was a lucky guess. That way, he develops a good lucky feeling. I bet a funny thing about driving a car off a cliff is, while you're in midair, you still hit those brakes. Hey, better try the emergency brake. To me, clowns aren't funny. In fact, they're kind of scary. I've wondered where this started, and I think it goes back to the time I went to the circus and a clown killed my dad. Most people don't realize that large pieces of coral, which have been painted brown and attached to the skull by common wood screws, can make a child look like a deer. If you're a cowboy and you're dragging a guy behind your horse, I bet it would really make you mad if you looked back and the guy was reading a magazine. The crows seem to be calling his name, thought Caw. If you lived in the Dark Ages and you were a catapult operator, I bet the most common question people would ask is, "Can't you make it shoot farther?" "No, I'm sorry, that's as far as it shoots." I hope if dogs ever take over the world and they choose a king, They don't just go by size, because I bet there are some chihuahuas with some good ideas. How come the dove gets to be the peace symbol? How about the pillow? It has more feathers than the dove, and it doesn't have that dangerous beak. If you ever drop your keys into a river of molten lava, let them go, because man, they're gone. It makes me mad when I go to all the trouble of having Marta cook up about 100 drumsticks. Then the guy at Marineland says, "You can't throw that chicken to the dolphins. They eat fish." Sure, they eat fish if that's all you give them. Man, wise up. As the evening sky faded from a salmon color to a sort of flint gray, I thought back to the salmon I caught that morning, and how gray he was, and how I named him Flint. I guess of all my uncles, I liked Uncle Caveman the best. We called him Uncle Caveman because he lived in a cave, and because sometimes he'd eat one of us. Later on, we found out he was a bear. Is there anything more beautiful than a beautiful, beautiful flamingo flying across in front of a beautiful sunset? And he's carrying a beautiful rose in his beak. And also he's carrying a very beautiful painting with his feet. And also, you're drunk. Probably the earliest fly swatters were nothing more than some sort of striking surface attached to the end of a long stick. It's easy to sit and scoff at an old man's folly, but also check out his Adam's apple. I wish a robot would get elected president. That way, when he came to town, we could all take a shot at him and not feel too bad. If you're a young mafia gangster out on your first date, I bet it's real embarrassing if someone tries to kill you. If God dwells inside us, like some people say, I sure hope he likes enchiladas, because that's what he's getting. I think a good novel would be where a bunch of men on a ship are looking for a whale. They look and look, but you know what? They never find him. And you know why they never find him? It doesn't say. The book leaves it up to you, the reader, to decide. Then, at the very end, there's a page you can lick, and it tastes like Kool-Aid. I remember one day I was at Grandpa's farm, and I asked him about sex. He sort of smiled and said, "Maybe instead of telling you what sex is, why don't we go out to the horse pasture and I'll show you?" So we did, and there on the ground were my parents having sex. It's easy to sit there and say you'd like more money, and I guess that's what I like about it. It's easy, just sitting there, rocking back and forth, wanting that money. If you go through a lot of hammers each month, I don't necessarily think it means you're a hard worker. It may just mean that you have a lot to learn about proper hammer maintenance. Instead of having answers on a math test, they should just call them impressions. And if you got a different impression, so what? Can't we all be brothers? I bet for an Indian, shooting an old fat pioneer woman in the back with an arrow, and she fires her shotgun into the ground as she falls over, is like the top thing you can do. If you ever go temporarily insane, don't shoot somebody like a lot of people do. Instead, try to get some weeding done, because you'd really be surprised. I bet what happened was, they discovered fire and invented the wheel on the same day. Then, that night, they burned the wheel. People laugh when I say that I think a jellyfish is one of the most beautiful things in the world. What they don't understand is, I mean a jellyfish with long blonde hair. When you go for a job interview, I think a good thing to ask is if they ever press charges. Whether they ever find life there or not, I think Jupiter should be considered an enemy planet. I wish I had a kryptonite cross, because then you could keep both Dracula and Superman away. Dad always thought laughter was the best medicine, which I guess was why several of us died of tuberculosis. If you ever drop your keys into a river of molten lava, let them go, because man, they're gone. Many people never stop to realize that a tree is a living thing, not that different from a tall, leafy dog that has roots and is very quiet. I wish I would have a real tragic love affair and get so bummed out that I'd just quit my job and become a bum for a few years, because I was thinking about doing that anyway. Whenever someone asks me to define love, I usually think for a minute, then I spin around and pin the guy's arm behind his back. Now who's asking the questions? Maybe in order to understand mankind, we have to look at the word itself, mankind. Basically, it's made up of two separate words, mank and eind. What do these words mean? It's a mystery, and that's why so is mankind. I think a good movie would be about a guy who's a brain scientist, but he gets hit on the head and it damages the part of the brain that makes you want to study the brain. I can still recall old Mr. Barnslow getting out every morning and nailing a fresh load of tadpoles to that old board of his. Then he'd spin it round and round like a wheel of fortune, and no matter where it stopped, he'd yell, "Tadpoles! Tadpoles is a winner!" We all thought he was crazy, but then we had some growing up to do. If I come back as an animal in my next lifetime, I hope it's some type of parasite, because this is the part where I take it easy. Whenever I see an old lady slip and fall on a wet sidewalk, my first instinct is to laugh. But then I think, what if I was an ant and she fell on me? Then it wouldn't seem quite so funny. I believe in making the world safe for our children, but not for our children's children, because I don't think children should be having sex. If you go through a lot of hammers each month, I don't necessarily think it means you're a hard worker. It may just mean that you have a lot to learn about proper hammer maintenance. I think in one of my previous lives, I was a mighty king, because I like people to do what I say. If you go parachuting, and your parachute doesn't open, and your friends are all watching you fall, I think a funny gag would be to pretend you were swimming. Isn't it funny how whenever we go to a county fair or a state fair, the first thing we do is see if they have some kind of pornography booth? I think a good gift for the president would be a chocolate revolver, and since he's so busy, you'd probably have to run up real quick and hand it to him. Lori got offended that I used the word puke, but to me, that's what her dinner tasted like. As we were driving, we saw a sign that said, "Watch for rocks." Marta said it should read, "Watch for pretty rocks." I told her she should write in her suggestion to the highway department, but she started saying it was a joke, just to get out of writing a simple letter, and I thought I was lazy. It makes me mad when people say I turned and ran like a scared rabbit. Maybe it was like an angry rabbit who was running to go fight in another fight, away from the first fight. You know what would make a good story? Something about a clown who makes people happy, but inside he's real sad. Also, he has severe diarrhea. I think Superman and Santa Claus are actually the same guy, and I'll tell you why. Both fly, both wear red, and both have a beard. Marta talks about sensuality, but I don't think she'd know sensuality if it bit her on the ass. Contrary to what most people say, the most dangerous animal in the world is not the lion or the tiger or even the elephant. It's a shark riding on an elephant's back, just trampling and eating everything they see. When I found the skull in the woods, the first thing I did was call the police. But then I got curious about it. I picked it up and started wondering who this person was and why he had deer horns. Too bad there's not such a thing as a golden skunk, because you'd probably be proud to be sprayed by one. Today I accidentally stepped on a snail on the sidewalk in front of our house, and I thought, I too am like that snail. I build a defensive wall around myself, a shell if you will. But my shell isn't made out of a hard protective substance. Mine is made out of tinfoil and paper bags. Anytime I see something screech across a room and latch onto someone's neck, and the guy screams and tries to get it off, I have to laugh, because what is that thing? I wish outer space guys would conquer Earth and make people their pets, because I'd like to have one of those little basket beds with my name on it. If I was a doctor operating on a patient and he died on me, and his spirit was hovering above his own body, looking down on it, I would take out $100 bill, flash it at the spirit, and then stuff it in the hand of the dead body. This would coax the spirit to return to his body. If that didn't work, I'd put the body's hand on the breast of a nurse. That ought to do it. In any case, I'd take the $100 bill back before he woke up. When people say that the desert is lifeless, it just makes me want to grab them by the collar and yell, "Why, you stupid, stupid bastard." Then I drive them out into the desert to where the circus is and point out the many forms of zebra and clown life. If trees could scream, would we be so cavalier about cutting them down? We might, if they screamed all the time for no good reason. If a kid asks where rain comes from, I think a cute thing to tell him is, God is crying. And if he asks why God is crying, another cute thing to tell him is, probably because of something you did. I remember how my great-uncle Jerry would sit on the porch and whittle all day long. Once he whittled me a toy boat out of a larger toy boat I had. It was almost as good as the first one, except now it had bumpy whittle marks all over it. And no paint, because he had whittled off the paint. One thing vampire children have to be taught early on is, don't run with a wooden stake. When the age of the Vikings came to a close, they must have sensed it. Probably they gathered together one evening, slapped each other on the back and said, "Hey, good job." In weightlifting, I don't think sudden, uncontrolled urination should automatically disqualify you. The wise man can pick up a grain of sand and envision a whole universe, but the stupid man will just lay down on some seaweed and roll around until he's completely draped in it. Then he'll stand up and go, "Hey, I'm Vine Man." If you ever teach a yodeling class, probably the hardest thing is to keep the students from just trying to yodel right off. You see, we build to that.
And now, the lost deep thoughts by Jack Handey.
Instead of mouse traps, what about baby traps? Not to harm the babies, but just to hold them down until they can be removed. Instead of crucifying a guy on a cross, what about a windmill? That way you get the pain and the dizziness. For me, the worst thing about having King Kong walk down your street is that kids could look up and see the giant genitalia. They say the mountain holds many secrets, but the biggest is this: I am a fake mountain.